So then,
So
you
the
know, at
movie
that
evolved
point,
and took a little bit of a different orientation, right? I imagine you've got a lot of footage.
maybe more than a little bit.
Right, you have all that footage from the year and a half prior, and then it was like there was this watershed moment where his life
Absolutely.
changed in a different way.
Absolutely. And at first I thought, well, you know, these rallies kind of have nothing to do with what I'd been focusing on in the film, but I can't ignore them. It's such a big part of what's happening in his life. So within a couple of weeks, I realized, okay, I need to switch my focus. This film right now can no longer be about the friendship of Jordan and Charles. That sort of has to be put on hold. And I need to try to make sense of this controversy that's unraveling right now.
Interesting postscript, or not even a postscript, but another layer to go back to that story. I imagine you're going to create it at some point, right?
Yes, that's very much my intention now that this film is done and we've just finished our tour of the film. I do intend on going back and finishing that film. It's tentatively called michele, which in Charles's language, in Kwakwala, it means to dream. And the dream world plays a very big role in the film because both Charles has very vivid dreams and Jordan and Tammy have dreams as well that in both places they draw a lot of inspiration and learning and self-reflection from their dream world. So we plan on animating their dreams and kind of showing how the dreams are informing their realities.
Oh, that's wonderful. You know, as you're speaking, I'm thinking from my perspective, which is I study Chassidut and Kabbalah. And one of the meanings of the word Kabbalah is to receive. It's a received tradition. It's an oral tradition. And you need to learn from the people who are transmitting that tradition. But another meaning, a root word connected to Kabbalah is lahakbil, which means to align. There are the, similar to, you know, if you think of Baudelaire and his notion of correspondence, that there's these corresponding levels. And that's something I've always found interesting in Dr. Peterson's work, is that certainly in his videos on how he understands the Bible, or let's say when you said he looked at political scenarios, historical, it was with, well, what's the another layer that we can use to look at that, which is the psychology or the spirit that is behind that. What allows groups to behave in the way that we do? And as you're speaking about these two movies, I'm thinking, well, you know, they're both about the same man, but they're like these parallel stories that are reflecting one to the other.
I think Jordan is such a complex person that in this film, I think we reveal sides of him and aspects of him that people don't know. But then in the next film, in Michele, it's yet another side and another level, especially for people that solely associate him with the controversy. It was so strange that in October 2016, this is the very early stages of the controversy unfolding. And in that same month, that's when Charles Joseph and his chief and some of his family flew to Toronto to bless the space in Jordan's home, to bless his third floor, because it was now complete. And there was a ceremony there, and Jordan was given a name in Kwakwala. Wow. And so it was so strange to go from, you know, I think before that same day when I was there at his place getting ready to film the ceremony, first he was doing some media interviews about this controversy, and then there was that ceremony taking place. It was very surreal.
It's the same person in two different dimensions of his life. And, you know, that's one of the reasons I love the movie so much. Even in this one, without looking at the parallels between the two stories about one person, you're looking at the transgender community's view of his insistence on the government, or his aversion to the government insisting on our preferred pronouns, and how resistant they are to that, and at the same time how insistent he is to saying, no, I'm going to hold this. There has to be, I'm affixing myself to that. There has to be freedom. You can tell people that they can't say things, but you can't tell them what they have to say. And you know, when I've looked, I'm thinking, and we've spoken about this, particularly the Cathy Newman story.
Right.
That interview just fascinates me, because what I see, and I think there were a couple of moments in the film as well, where it's just apparent what he says and what people hear to my ears and heart are not the same thing. It's almost like there's a confirmation bias or a filter. I used to teach study skills at the University of Witwatersrand, and we would tell the students there's information in front of your eyes, but don't think about the information behind your eyes. And our focus was to try and get them to look at the relationship between that. And in watching the Cathy Newman video and at moments in your movie, I had the sense that there's been an iron curtain put up between those two bits of information. Mm-hmm. That people seem not to be able to hear what I understand his point to be.
I mean, that interview certainly is probably the best example of exactly what you're describing. I mean, definitely there was a lack of charity, but beyond charity, even kind of just genuine understanding in the way that often people were receiving what Jordan was saying. And to be fair, I think sometimes he could have been more generous in his empathy sometimes to the motivations and goals of social justice. But at the same time,
in a broader context, or in that interview?
No, not in that interview at all. In other scenarios, or in a broader context, or even, for example, so I'm not being vague about it. I think when he initially came out with the statements about Bill C-16, he talked about it in a very critical, skeptical context, which is fine, but there wasn't any kind of empathy or description given to saying something like, I can understand where the will to have human rights protection for vulnerable populations comes from. And I think just the lack of kind of, sandwiching your statements with something like that sometimes immediately puts people off and makes them skeptical of like, okay, well, what are you really about here? Why are you picking trans people? Like, I can understand where that comes from. If this is the first thing that you're hearing about from this person, it's a pretty badass thing to be criticizing a human rights law, right? It raises flags for people. So just in that sense. But in the interview with Cathy Newman, no, I thought he handled that interview exceptionally well. Yeah. And I mean, it was just crazy the way she was misinterpreting.
In the movie, just for those who aren't familiar with it, Patricia covers a rally, and as that rally is going on, there's students who try and prevent Dr. Peterson from speaking, or other speakers, and I think they pulled the cord from the back of the speaker, right?
They actually brought their own speaker, and they pulled the cord from the speaker with the microphone, and they also brought their own speaker to
drown out the noise.
And drown it out with noise.
Yeah, look, I see a crab is exoskeletal. It's the skeletons on the outside, and real health is you've got strong bones. In Hebrew, bones are atzamot, and your essence is your etzem. And I was watching that and thinking, wow, this is exoskeletal behavior. This is people protecting a really vulnerable inside. And the way it manifests is with harshness, aggression. And I found the most tense moment in the movie to be where he rips out the cord or attempts to from theirs. And I was like, oh, like that comes across really aggressive. If you don't have a context, and it seems that was what was promoted. And later, when you interview him, he says that was pretty tense. He refers to that moment.
Yeah.